In the year 3098, Earth had become part of a vast and ever-expanding galaxy, a place where alliances between worlds were as fragile as the thin threads of a spider's web. The Galactic Council, an assembly of powerful alien species who had dominated space for millennia, held the fate of countless planets in their hands. Earth had always kept a quiet profile, not wanting to stir the hornet's nest that was the political chaos of the galaxy. The humans were respected for their ingenuity, but the Council saw them as nothing more than a developing species, still learning the ways of the universe. However, that perception was about to be shattered. The message came one day without warning, a cold, threatening communication from the Varnock Empire, an alien race known for their brutality. Towering, four-armed beings, the Varnock had crushed entire star systems, their bloodlust only equaled by their insatiable thirst for power. The message was simple, but chilling. Humans are weak. You hide behind walls and treaties. We demand war. Show us what you really are, or be wiped out. The Galactic Council watched with a mixture of disbelief and intrigue. The Varnock had sent such challenges before, but never to a species as young as humanity. It was not an offer for peace or a request for resources. It was a demand for battle, an invitation to test their strength. The message was as much a statement of power as it was an ultimatum. On Earth, chaos erupted. The political leaders gathered in an emergency session. Some argued that they should comply, giving the Varnock what they wanted, hoping to avoid a larger conflict. Others proposed that humanity should negotiate, offering resources or technology in exchange for peace. However, the majority of Earth's leaders realized that offering anything to the Varnock would show weakness, an invitation for more demands. The fear of what might happen if they gave in paralyzed the room. Every strategy, every plan seemed to fall apart. How could humanity fight an empire that could destroy entire civilizations with ease? In the midst of the panic, a figure stood up. Commander Jack Rourke, a retired Special Forces officer who had seen more combat than most military leaders combined, stepped into the room. He was known across Earth's military circles, though not always for the best reasons. Jack was a ghost from past wars, a legend who had fought against overwhelming odds and emerged victorious. He had retired years ago, tired of the constant battles and bloodshed. But now, the Varnock had made their move, and Jack knew that only one thing could stop them, one person, armed with the right skills and the right resolve. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't consult the council or plead his case. Jack simply walked into the room and addressed them in his usual calm, unwavering manner. "Let me go," he said. At first, the room fell silent. The leaders were taken aback. Here, in the middle of a crisis that could lead to the destruction of Earth, one man was offering to take on the Varnock alone. The idea seemed preposterous. The Varnock were powerful, their fleets vast and nearly unstoppable. How could one human stand against them? "We have a fleet," one of the leaders began. "We have resources. We need to gather our forces, make a strategic plan." But Jack interrupted, his voice cutting through the confusion. "I'm not asking for a fleet. I'm not asking for a war council. I'm asking to do it alone." The words stunned them. The idea of one person, just a single man, facing down an empire that had crushed entire planets, seemed insane. There were murmurs of disbelief. Some laughed, thinking it was a joke, a desperate plea for attention. Others shook their heads, thinking he had lost his mind. But Jack's gaze didn't waver. He stood tall, his expression as cold and focused as it had been in the countless missions he had completed in his past. He wasn't asking for glory or fame. He was asking for the chance to protect the planet he loved, on his own terms. "What do you mean, alone?" another leader asked, still not fully grasping the gravity of the situation. "How can one man fight a war? You'll need an army." Jack's eyes locked onto the leaders, steady and unyielding. "I don't need an army. I am the army." The room fell into an uneasy silence. For a moment, it felt like time itself had stopped. The council members exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of how to respond. They all knew Jack's reputation, but they couldn't understand why he would take on such a monumental task alone. Finally, one of the leaders, President Arian Lee, spoke up. She was known for her level-headedness and strategic mind, and her voice had a calming authority. "Commander Rourke," she began carefully, "we have seen your record. You've accomplished things that no one else could. But this is different. This isn't a skirmish, it's a full-scale war. You will need more than your ship and your skills." Jack didn't flinch. He took a step forward, his voice growing, more resolute. "If the Varnock want war, I'll give it to them, personally." There was a quiet murmur of disbelief from the room, but Jack's certainty was contagious. The president nodded slowly, finally understanding the core of his argument. It wasn't about the scale of the war. It was about sending a message, one that would echo through the galaxy. If the Varnock were going to demand war, they would get it. But not on their terms. Humanity would fight on its own. "I'll go alone," Jack said, turning to leave the room. "Get me the ship I need, and I'll handle the rest." And so, Jack Rourke's journey began. He wasn't the first to try and take on the Varnock, but he would be the last. As the council scrambled to assemble their fleets, Jack prepared to face the impossible. He wasn't just going to war. He was about to deliver something the galaxy had never seen before. A human fighting back, not with armies or tactics, but with sheer will and unshakable determination. He had been pushed too far, and now he was ready to show the galaxy what Earth's greatest soldier could do when backed into a corner. It would be a war like no other. And Jack Rourke was about to deliver it, personally. Commander Jack Rourke had never been one to follow orders unless they made sense to him. And this mission, unlike any he had faced before, wasn't about following orders. It was about sending a message, one that would ripple across the galaxy. His ship, the Havoc-class interceptor, was far from ordinary. It was sleek, fast, and equipped with advanced weaponry capable of turning any vessel to space debris. But Jack didn't need the full arsenal of firepower that the military had offered. He had no intention of using overwhelming force. Instead, he stripped the ship down to the basics, just the essentials for his mission. There would be no crew, it would be just him. Weapons, armor, fuel, and space for the trophies he would collect after every victory. Everything else could be discarded. The Havoc shot out of Earth's atmosphere with a silent precision that was nearly impossible to detect. His course was set, straight for the heart of Varnock space, the very center of the empire that had issued the challenge. The distance was vast, but Jack didn't mind. Space, to him, had always been a place of silence, a place where the only thing that mattered was focus. As the stars streaked by, Jack prepared himself mentally for what was to come. It wasn't the first time he had fought against overwhelming odds, but the Varnock were different. They weren't just an enemy, they were a force of nature, a cruel reminder that in the galaxy, power meant survival. As Jack entered Varnock space, the first signs of resistance came swiftly. 3 patrol ships appeared on his radar, their dark shapes emerging from behind the distant moon of a gas giant. They were the vanguard of the Varnock's ever-watchful military presence. These ships were smaller than the colossal dreadnoughts that commanded the Varnock fleet, but they were still formidable. Their hulls were coated with reflective alloys designed to confuse radar readings, and their weapons were capable of turning an unprotected vessel into ashes in seconds. But Jack wasn't concerned with size or strength. He knew how to fight in ways that didn't rely on brute force. He wasted no time. The first patrol ship locked onto him, its guns charging for an attack. Jack smiled to himself, his fingers dancing over the controls. The Havoc was designed for speed, and it was built for maneuvering. He kicked the thrusters to full power, the ship blasting into a series of sharp, evasive maneuvers. His ship's sleek frame dodged between the incoming fire with precision. Each blast from the enemy ships missed by mere inches, the shockwaves rattling the ship. But Jack held steady. Then, without warning, he turned the tables. He launched a series of smart bombs that detonated directly in the path of the Varnock ships, sending them spiraling into chaos. A single burst from his plasma cannons shattered the first patrol ship, and it was gone. Nothing left but drifting debris. The second patrol ship fired back, its main guns aimed straight at Jack's position. But again, Jack was faster. The Havoc zipped and weaved through the barrage with an almost unnatural grace. As the enemy vessel tried to adjust its aim, Jack locked on with his own targeting system. A missile erupted from the Havoc's rear, trailing fire as it raced toward the Varnock ship. The explosion that followed was massive, ripping through the patrol ship's hull and sending it spinning into the cold void of space. Only one ship remained, and Jack knew it wouldn't last long. He fired an EMP spike, a weapon designed to disable enemy electronics. The Varnock ship's shields flickered and died as its weapon systems locked up. Jack wasted no time, launching a final volley of plasma bursts that disintegrated the last ship with surgical precision. The battle was over in minutes. Jack didn't wait to see the aftermath. He was already heading deeper into Varnock territory. But this wasn't just about destroying ships. It was about sending a message. Each victory was marked by a simple message broadcast to the galaxy at large. You asked for war. I'm just getting started. And just like that, the tone of the war shifted. The Varnock had underestimated humanity. They thought they were facing an unprepared and weak species, but they were wrong. The broadcast went viral across the galaxy. Everyone knew about Jack's raid. The media buzzed with reports of the lone human who had taken on the Varnock and emerged victorious. It was a symbol of defiance, a message that, for once, the galaxy's most feared empire was not invincible. Over the next 72 hours, Jack continued. His assault, attacking Varnock outposts and military supply lines with ruthless efficiency. Each battle was more intense than the last, but Jack's skills were unmatched. He didn't rely on brute force or overwhelming numbers. Instead, he used strategy, cunning, and speed to outmaneuver every enemy he encountered. The Varnock, caught off guard and unprepared for such a relentless assault, scrambled to regroup. Their pride had been wounded, and their arrogance had clouded their judgment. At one point, Jack found himself in the heart of a Varnock-controlled system, the stars, around him glimmering coldly as he approached a heavily fortified supply depot. This time, the Varnock weren't going to let him slip by unnoticed. Their fleet had gathered in full force, heavily armed dreadnoughts and battleships lining up in a deadly formation. But Jack wasn't afraid. He had already proven that even the most fearsome enemy could be beaten with the right combination of skill and surprise. He calculated his moves carefully, mapping out the positions of each ship in his mind. With no room for error, he dived into the fray. The battle was a brutal dance of fire and evasion, each side unleashing everything they had. But Jack's tactics were flawless. He managed to destroy one dreadnought by targeting its weak spots, then swiftly turned his attention to the next. The Varnock were beginning to panic, their once impressive fleet crumbling under the pressure of Jack's relentless assault. Each time a ship fell, Jack didn't revel in the victory. He only saw it as one more step toward his ultimate goal, making the Varnock realize that their challenge had been a mistake. When he finally disabled the last of their ships, he broadcast another message to the galaxy. If you want war, you'll get it. But next time, make sure you're ready. The message was a turning point, one that would echo across the galaxy. Jack had done what no one thought was possible. He had delivered war to the Varnock personally, and now they knew they were facing a human who would not back down. But the battle was far from over. The Varnock were regrouping, and they would retaliate with everything they had. Jack knew the real war was just beginning. But for now, he had proven that one human, armed with only his wits and his skills, could defy even the most powerful empire in the galaxy. The galaxy had never seen a war like this before. Jack Rourke's bold attacks on the Varnock Empire had sent shockwaves through the entire universe, and the once mighty empire was scrambling to recover. The relentless onslaught had shattered their pride, and now their response would be swift and brutal. No longer would they see humanity as a weak, insignificant species. No longer would they underestimate the human spirit. The Varnock had rallied their forces, calling in every available ship, every officer, and every weapon in their arsenal. A massive fleet of dreadnoughts, battlecruisers, and warships assembled in the heart of Varnock space, ready to make one final stand against the lone human who had dared to challenge them. Jack knew what was coming. He could feel it in the cold, void of space as he drifted through the star system, alone on his ship. His sensors were alive with the movement of thousands of Varnock ships, their massive hulls gliding through the stars like shadows, their weapons primed and ready. There would be no more skirmishes, no more hit-and-run tactics. This time, the Varnock would come at him with everything they had. The entire might of their empire was now focused on one target, Jack Rourke. But Jack wasn't afraid. He had already faced impossible odds and come out victorious. Now, he prepared to do it again. Only this time, it wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message so loud and clear that the entire galaxy would hear it. His ship, the Havoc-class interceptor, wasn't the largest or the most powerful ship in the galaxy, but it was fast, agile, and deadly. Jack had outfitted it with every modification he could think of. Its weapons were state-of-the-art, designed for precision and speed rather than overwhelming force. He didn't need a fleet of ships to take on the Varnock. He just needed the right tools, the right strategy, and the right mindset. As the Varnock fleet approached, Jack didn't hesitate. He plotted a course directly into the heart of their formation, knowing that if he didn't take the initiative, they would overwhelm him before he even had a chance to fight. The first wave of Varnock ships came at him with terrifying speed. They didn't hesitate or try to outmaneuver him. They relied on their sheer firepower to break him apart. Jack's ship jolted as the first salvo of plasma fire struck his shields, but he had expected this. He kicked the thrusters into high gear, dodging and weaving through the incoming barrage. The Varnock ships fired relentlessly, their weapons, tearing through space with a fury that would have shattered any other ship. But the Havoc was built for this kind of combat, fast, evasive, and capable of turning on a dime. Jack's hands danced over the controls, his mind calculating every move before the enemy even had a chance to adjust. He was moving too quickly for the Varnock to track. Their weapons, though powerful, couldn't match the speed of his ship. With a skill born of years in the trenches, Jack began to strike back. His first target was a massive Varnock battleship, its dark hull a fortress of armor and firepower. Jack's plasma cannons fired in quick succession, piercing the ship's shields with surgical precision. The ship's guns returned fire, but Jack was already gone, slipping into the shadow of a nearby asteroid to evade the blasts. The Varnock were relentless, but Jack had learned to thrive under pressure. He moved like a predator, always one step ahead of his enemies. One by one, the Varnock ships fell. The battleship he had targeted exploded in a burst of fire and debris, its remains scattered across the cold void of space. Another ship went down with a direct hit to its engine core, sending it spiraling into the depths of space. Jack didn't give them a chance to regroup. He kept moving, never pausing, never stopping. Each ship he destroyed sent a message, not just to the Varnock, but to the entire galaxy. The message was simple. Humanity wasn't weak. Humanity wasn't a species to be taken lightly. As the battle raged on, the Varnock fleet began to falter. Their commanders, once confident in their overwhelming strength, were now scrambling to adjust their tactics. They had never faced an enemy, like Jack before, someone who fought with the cunning of a cornered animal, someone who didn't follow the rules of war. They had expected a conventional fight, but Jack wasn't playing by the rules. He was turning their own tactics against them, exploiting every weakness, every flaw in their strategy. At the height of the battle, Jack found himself face to face with the Varnock's flagship, the Predator. It was the largest and most heavily armed vessel in the fleet, a symbol of the Varnock's power and pride. If Jack could take down the Predator, it would be the final blow to the Varnock Empire's strength. But this would be no easy task. The Predator was surrounded by dozens of smaller ships, all ready to protect it at any cost. Jack knew that if he didn't act quickly, he would be overwhelmed. He didn't hesitate. With a burst of speed, he dove straight into the heart of the enemy formation. The Predator's massive guns opened fire, and Jack felt the impact on his shields, but he held firm. He wasn't aiming for the Predator's weapons or its shields. He was aiming for something more vulnerable, its power core. If he could disable the core, the entire ship would be crippled. With a quick adjustment to his course, Jack dove straight into the ship's defensive perimeter, dodging fire from smaller Varnock ships as he weaved his way closer to the core. The Varnock fleet's focus was on him, giving the Predator's defenses no time to react. Jack fired a concentrated burst from his ship's main cannon, hitting the power core with deadly precision. The explosion was instantaneous. The Predator's once proud hull buckled and then erupted into a fiery inferno, its massive frame torn apart by the sheer force of the blast. The remaining Varnock ships scattered, their morale shattered, their will to fight crumbling in the wake of the Predator's destruction. The message was clear now. Jack Rourke had defeated the Varnock Empire's mightiest vessel, and with it, the entire fleet. The Varnock, who had once demanded war, had been brought to their knees by a single human. There was no grand celebration, no moment of triumph. Jack didn't need any of that. The war wasn't over yet, but the galaxy had learned a powerful lesson. Humanity had faced the impossible and delivered it personally. The Varnock would never forget the price of their arrogance, and Jack Rourke had only just begun. He wasn't finished yet. The aftermath of the battle had left the galaxy reeling. The once mighty Varnock Empire, their pride shattered, no longer had the power to threaten humanity or any other species that had dared to oppose them. Yet, as Jack Rourke sat in the cockpit of his battered ship, the Havoc-class interceptor, he felt no relief. No sense of triumph filled his mind, no joy. The war had been personal from the very start, and now that it was over, it felt hollow, as though the entire galaxy had become a chessboard, and he was nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game. The once celebrated victory felt more like an inevitable consequence of his determination to prove something, a statement not just against the Varnock, but to every empire that thought humans would remain in the background, quietly enduring. Jack's victory over the Varnock had not been about strategy, strength, or sheer numbers. It had been about a mindset that refused to acknowledge defeat. As the debris of the battle scattered across the stars, Jack did what he always did when a war ended. He looked for the next challenge, for something to fill the void that victories failed to satisfy. The galaxy was large, and many forces existed that had always remained hidden in the shadows. The Varnock had fallen, but other dangers were lurking. He knew that peace was never permanent in the void of space, and the moment one conflict ended, another would always rise from the ashes. For Jack, the idea of waiting for the next threat to emerge was just another form of submission. No, he would go looking for it himself. The call came weeks later, through a secure comm channel, an encrypted message so well hidden it took Jack nearly a day to crack the code. It was from an anonymous source, a voice, devoid of emotion, a tone so cold it sent a chill down his spine. The Varnock are not the only ones watching. You've earned the attention of something far greater. You will regret this. We will make sure of it. That was all the message said. No name, no clue as to the identity of the sender, and yet the message felt real. The words haunted Jack as he traced the coordinates embedded in the transmission. He wasn't sure whether the warning came from a potential enemy or someone trying to manipulate him. But Jack had learned by now that when someone in the galaxy wanted to remain anonymous, it often meant they had something to hide. His instincts told him to track down the source of the message, to learn who had sent it and why. If they had the power to threaten him, they would have the power to make good on their words. The galaxy had many hidden corners, dark places that even the most powerful of empires dared not venture. Jack wasn't afraid of the unknown. He welcomed it. So, with no hesitation, he set course toward the coordinates. He didn't expect answers. He didn't expect allies. All he expected was that he would find what was lurking in the shadows of the galaxy, and if it tried to make him regret the war with the Varnock, it would soon learn that it had picked the wrong person to intimidate. The journey took him into the heart of uncharted space. The stars here were far dimmer. Their light, barely reaching the black void, there was nothing but silence. The kind of silence that hung heavy in the air, like an oppressive force that tried to smother everything it touched. It was the kind of space that humans were never meant to explore. Cold, distant, and unforgiving. As Jack's ship drifted deeper into this dark expanse, he began to feel a shift in the atmosphere, a sense that he wasn't alone. It wasn't the feeling of being pursued, but rather of something watching him from the edges of the void, patiently waiting for the right moment to make its move. The coordinates led him to an asteroid field, a massive cluster of rock and debris that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. It was in the center of this field that he found a structure unlike anything he had ever seen, an ancient space station, its surface covered in strange markings and symbols. The station looked abandoned, but something about it felt alive, as though the very metal of the structure pulsed with an energy that was foreign and unsettling. Jack's heart raced as he docked his ship and stepped out into the eerie silence of the station's cold interior. The air was stale, thick with dust, and the lighting was dim, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and move with the flicker of the lights. The station was a relic of a long-forgotten time, but Jack could feel its power. It had been built by something, that was far beyond the Varnock, far beyond humanity. He moved through the corridors, his footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness, until he came across a large chamber, its walls lined with strange alien technology that seemed to hum with energy. At the center of the room, there was a figure, cloaked in a dark robe, standing with their back to Jack. The figure didn't move as he approached, and Jack could feel their presence, like a weight pressing down on him. "I knew you would come," the figure's voice echoed, deep and resonant, reverberating through the chamber. "You've made your mark on the galaxy, human. But this will be your last mistake." Jack's pulse quickened, but he didn't hesitate. He had fought beings far more powerful than the Varnock. He had faced entire fleets and had come out on top. This was no different. "Who are you?" Jack demanded, his voice steady. "And what do you want with me?" The figure turned slowly, and Jack's eyes widened as he saw what stood before him. It was not human, nor Varnock, nor any species he had encountered before. It was something ancient, its body an intricate blend of organic and mechanical parts. Its face was hidden behind a dark, shimmering mask, but its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed with an eerie, otherworldly light. "I am the one who watches," the figure said, its voice carrying a weight of inevitability. "You, Jack Rourke, have made a name for yourself. The galaxy now knows you as a force to be reckoned with, but there are forces far older, far more powerful than you can imagine. Forces that do not forgive. Forces that do not forget. You will regret crossing them." Jack took a step forward, the fear he had felt earlier replaced by an overwhelming determination. The Varnock were nothing compared to this. This was the unknown, something that had existed long before the empires, long before humanity. If this was the price of challenging the galaxy, then Jack was ready to face it. He was never afraid of a fight, and if this was the fight he was meant to face, he would not back down. "I've faced worse," Jack said, his voice unwavering. "And I'll face this too." The figure's glowing eyes narrowed as it slowly raised a hand. "Then prepare yourself, human. The war you have started is far from over."